I didn't fall victim to the scam, but I believed it just until the moment they started to ask me for things that I'm like, okay, this is a scam. But yeah, like there was a moment where I thought I was going to be making like upper middle class money, and I was like, fuck you guys.
Drop that class solidarity like it's hot.
Yeah, it's like, damn, oh, that's how this works. That's how capitalism works.
That's funny.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Trent Christiansen. How you doing, man?
Doing good.
You are currently showing at our open call show at Monte Vista Projects. Congratulations.
Yeah, happy to be included. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
I mean,
cool
I
group.
didn't like that was somebody else's job, but I was very glad when you got in because I'm familiar with your work.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah. So I grew up in Colorado, a small
Mhm.
town called Canyon City. It's like south of Colorado Springs by 30-45 minutes.
But were you like a granola kid?
No, where I grew up is kind of like more like cowboy country a little bit. So there's more like we had a pretty big rodeo, and uh like our two claims to fame are like we have a huge suspension bridge that's kind of like a tourist attraction that's called the Royal Gorge Bridge, and people come out there for that and like do rafting underneath it on the
Oh, cool.
river. And then other people know us because there's like a huge penal system there. Like there's like 13 prisons in the county that I grew up in, so a lot
Wow.
of a lot of people, a lot of adults that stick around there end up working there in
Mhm.
the penal system in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in a town of corrections officers. That's
Pretty
what you're
much, yeah.
telling
It's
me.
like definitely a dark energy of like there's like a cloud that very much hangs over the space, and
It's like a
the
subtext of punishment.
for sure. And like there's kind of like a company like, or like the corrections officers like have like a common phrase where they're like just putting in my time 8 hours at a time, kind of like they're
Wow.
like
They
feel
feel
like
like
they're in
prisoners.
prison. Yeah, totally. So, there's like a lot of alcoholism and like
Yeah, I would
dark stuff
imagine.
that happens
I
just
mean, but I
as a
think,
result of, I think it's hard
yeah.
to be in that position.
No, I mean that is definitely a difficult job, and like it's hard to separate the person from the job, the
Institution, totally,
institution.
absolutely.
But to some degree, they're also victims, but like not really.
They're also like very much perpetrators if they're assholes too. Like
Yeah, I mean,
they have
if
a lot of power if they want to flex it.
and those studies like of just like college kids where they get to play in prison, you know.
It's like
So
it's not humanity's shining point.
yeah. So you as an individual corrections officer that is watching the show, we love you. But in general, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it must be hard like with the 13th Amendment. Like if you are actually, I wonder how many cops and whatnot are actually fully aware and don't have illusions about what policing is, especially in this country. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
this
mean,
does not have to be our topic.
it's like one of those things that's like, I think we aren't able to hold all of that and actually do the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like there's a very like real defense mechanism that I think like
Yeah.
happens in your psychology where you're like, I'm just not gonna think about that
Well,
for the
cool.
8 hours.
Yeah. And then you are also into like pretty into biking?
Yeah, so cycling, like riding bicycles has been like a pretty consistent thing for me. Kind of, I mean, I grew up riding them and like kind of like got around town riding like BMX bikes and stuff
Mhm.
growing up, but since moving to LA, I initially moved here without a car.
Mhm.
And so cycling was kind of like how I got around. And
Wow.
so it's yeah, I've been riding in LA and other places pretty much since then. So it's been a cool.
But you're part of like one of those cycling gangs that we see riding around the street.
Yeah, I mean, I've
You
ridden
run
with
guns.
those a lot.
No, wait,
Well,
that's
it's funny.
motorcycle gangs.
It's funny because like every once in a while I'll forget that like eh, the general population does not refer to bicyclists as like bikers,
Yeah,
and so I'll be
yeah.
like, oh yeah, like I bike, and people are like, oh yeah, like you're in Hell's Angels. I'm like, no, it's a very different scene. But yeah, I ride with those people sometimes. It's cool to like. I think the power or like the interesting thing when you're like are in a big group is it's like one time when you're riding on the streets where you actually feel safe
Yeah, yeah.
because there's so many people and like you can block off like a full lane where when you're riding by yourself, it's just like you're kind of always like a little bit on edge where it's like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
man, you run into someone who's like a bit of an aggressive driver and it just feels a little real. But
But like, I mean, you must have been fit, dude, when you first got out here. If you were like riding your bike everywhere, it's not. It's it. There's hills.
yeah, I mean, cyclists are funny because like we like the hills. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like the punishment is our
Is the
like
reward? Oh,
no,
okay.
it's not the reward, but like there's something about like putting yourself through a painful thing that you like get to the end of and you're like, ah, I feel better after that, but like during it sucked.
Yeah.
So cyclists have like we're all kind of like I lovingly describe it as like we're kind of all broken in a funny way where it's like, oh yeah, that pain felt great, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
during it, I was like hating it
It's like tattoos.
a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. Like where
Yeah.
people like are really proud of how much pain they can endure, and I'm like, I'm a pussy. No tats. Don't hurt me. Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. So then, what brought you out to LA?
Initially, I was like just kind of taking a break from college, and I didn't really know what to do.
What were you studying?
I was just doing like the general education, and I like to be honest, it was kind of like that pivot of like, do I study art or like do I kind of like do a different degree? And so I
Mm.
was taking some time off and my older brother lived out here and so he was like, come hang out in LA and I had kind of been in Colorado for the first 19 years of my life, so I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Like,
Oh, so you've been out here a while then.
yeah, I've been out here essentially since then. I had a year where I lived in Europe teaching English
Where at?
in Madrid.
Oh, cool.
Um, and that was, yeah, that was cool. Like, really nice to get out of LA for a little bit and kind of like, I've always kind of toyed around with living abroad, but it was, when I came back, it was also like, oh, I really like LA still.
Yeah. It's such a weird feeling to like LA because
It
it's like
is.
there's what you're wrong, but it's you still feel like
Yeah.
it's not a
It's not
great.
for everyone. It's like an acquired taste in that, like, I don't know. I think in the same way that like I'm kind of like laughingly describe myself as like broken because I like the pain of riding up a hill. It's kind of like a city that's an uphill battle a little bit where
Yeah.
like it's you know,
I
it's
mean,
not easy to love it, but when you do love it, like I don't know, it's something magical about it.
it is the only mega city that I'm familiar with or that I've been to. I know that like Mexico's supposed to be the biggest city in the world, so I definitely want to go check that out. But
Mexico City?
yeah,
Yeah.
Mexico City. But man, like there's something about like when you stand up on a hill and you can see all the different downtowns. It totally reminds me of Judge Dredd. It's like, oh, we're doing it. But yeah, it is such a weird, crazy place. It's almost as weird as Las Vegas, like that someone decided to put a town here where there's no water, you
Totally.
know. But cool, man. Well then, all right. So then, art origins or art origin story. Where did you start getting into art making? When did you like realize? Obviously,
Yeah.
by 19, you had already started because you were deciding whether you wanted to study art.
Yeah, so I had kind of always, yeah, been interested in making stuff, but I like it wasn't really something that I saw as like a possibility or was exposed to that much until I would say like in high school, I had some really cool art teachers that were just kind of like uh that just kind of like let us do our thing a little bit and like I think they saw it was like kind of in that era of almost like dazed and confused art teacher where they're like half the kids in the class are like there to just like totally fuck around and then there's like some people who are like, oh, I like making stuff and I'm like interested in it, learning more about this, and so they kind of like really zeroed in on those students and
Mm,
really like let us not like craft our own class or anything, but there was like certain times when they would like let me come in during lunch and just like work on a ceramics project and like
mm.
they just saw that there was a few of us that were like into it and kind of made space for that. So I definitely owe a lot to those teachers and just like kind of I guess just like making it seem like like a legitimate possibility and that like
Mhm.
there was like something there to explore.
So they did you a disservice.
Exactly. Pulled the wool right over my eyes.
No, yeah. Yeah, I actually had a teacher in college that I keep remembering that I told her, like, around the time where I started to decide that I wanted to be an artist, and she goes, "Don't."
That's
She
really
was, like,
funny.
so miserable as an artist. And I was like and then as a cocky kid, I was like, "Well, your art's not good," you know? And
That's so
then
funny. I know people try to tell me that type of stuff too, but I think I just,
yeah.
like just wasn't really paying attention to what they were saying.
But I mean, you are going into or so do you have a BFA or,
Yeah, I got a
okay,
BFA
so
in
then alright.
2012. So I like lived out here for a bit and then I ended up finishing school and I went inland from here at Azusa Pacific University.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I
How
got
was
my
their program?
BFA. It was like it's always like a bit of a caveat because it's a religious school.
Oh, okay.
So like I think like as an institution, they like definitely are like way more conservative and pretty problematic in certain ways. But what's cool is like the art department was like all the people who really were like the freaks and geeks of that kind of like scene. So it was a really accepting environment and like a lot of my professors were really cool. So I think
Or
that exchange.
do you have a religious upbringing or
Yeah, my parents are
like
religious.
what?
They like evangelical Christians.
Evangelical,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You
So
you you almost didn't wanna disclose that.
yeah, I mean, it's like
'Cause
a
'cause
whole wormhole, right?
yeah.
Like whenever we bring up religion, it can be like a mixed bag, but
But are they
it's
like did you grow up going to, like, big churches and stuff?
our church wasn't like super big. It's like a couple hundred people, but it was a
Okay,
pretty
so
like
it's not
central role in like how I grew up. Like that was definitely like we were at church every Sunday for sure. And
that's better
yeah.
than every day, like, which
Oh,
some people do.
totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like, yeah, I think for growing up religious, it was fairly mild. Like they weren't like zealots or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
but
yeah.
and like, we got to do like we weren't living in this like dark ages or like anything
Yeah.
like super wild, but yeah, there is parts where,
Well, I'm
like
glad you got a
anything.
chance to clarify because I think when people think of evangelical, it immediately goes to somewhere, like Trump supporter.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
You know?
think like our church, like it was like a very much a like they're kind of like Christ centered, want to be like helping people, but then there's also like the other side of it where it's like, they were super pro Bush and pro
Yeah.
war and like kind of other aspects, whereas like a young person, it was kind of a little like, wait, what's going on? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm from Florida, so I feel you, man.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what? Yeah, that's cool. All right, so then did you have something that you wanted to talk about today specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, like nerding out on stuff, I'm like not the best like art nerd, but I
Oh,
think,
I'm not an art nerd
yeah,
either.
it's like for me, it was kind of like gonna talk a little bit about like outsider art and like some other exposure to that stuff that was kind of at least felt to me like maybe a seed of something that we could explore. And
Yeah, for
then,
sure. So I've had it explained to me before what outsider art technically is. I actually thought it was just a term for anybody that's like an amateur, but it's like a specific genre of art, right?
yeah, I mean, I think there's like different terms that people use, but I think for my concept of like what outsider art is, like it's generally someone like you said who is like kind of like maybe outside of the mainstream or outside of like a New York or LA or like a gallery kind of scene and are kind of operating in their own like nebulous or like kind of self-taught usually.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it has like to do with people who at least historically are like people who have maybe had like a mental break and like
Like a
have.
Daniel Johnston.
Yeah, I think Daniel Johnson's like a really good archetype for like outsider musician.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was something that kind of I got exposed to. And to me as like a young person, it kind of like, and still to this day, like uh is kind of like a raw expression that I really like
Mhm.
feel attracted to, and is like very something that like yeah, kind of speaks to me.
Would you say that like it's an influence that shows up in the work?
Uh I think whether unconsciously or consciously, yeah, it's
Okay.
something that I'm like considering, or like for me when I'm like kind of circling back what to focus on, like there's something about like drawings that like
People, we're outside, guys.
yeah. Yeah, the opportune weed whacker time. It's like that.
That one weed is like he's trying to hit that one spot. He's like, zzz, zzz, why won't you die?
It takes me back to lawn mowing and weed whacking in my young adulthood.
Oh, really? Did you have a business?
No, my dad had some rental property, so we were kind of like all of the sons were the like de facto
I'm sure you were older
gardeners.
than 16, right?
Yeah, right. Wink, wink.
Cool. Well, then, so like, what are some examples? Because I'm actually not very well versed in it, but I like because when you say outsider art, the main people that come up to me are like Daniel Johnston, and then who's the guy that used to was on Howard Stern all the time and like used to throw Pepsi commercials at the end of his songs.
Oh,
Um,
is it Wesley
Something like that.
Willis?
Wesley Willis,
Yeah,
yeah, something
yeah,
like that. Man, I was
totally.
so like what I was picturing in my head was so different.
Yeah, those are definitely good examples, but like, and
I'm
like
just not familiar.
musician
Yeah,
like
I'm just not familiar
origins.
with the visual art side of it.
Totally. I think for me, like what was fun to kind of think about is like, okay, this is something I'm into. Like, what was an early exposure of that in my life? And I kind of thought like some of them are also like um people who like build crazy stuff. So I think in LA, obviously, like Watts Towers is a really good example of like
Oh, okay.
an outsider art that's like a kind of monumental like stature, and like
Hmm.
obviously more like architectural or building esque, but definitely very like
Who made
artistic as
that?
well.
Who do you know?
This guy named Simon Rodia, and
Okay,
he's super, yeah, he's like kind of an enigma in that like he kind of just like dipped after a while. Like he like finished the project and then I think moved to Northern California and like
never did
wasn't
anything again, or
I don't think he like made like I don't think he made anything that big,
that
and
big?
I think he kind of fell off the radar. Was kind of what my understanding of his was, but there what kind of was an early exposure for me is like in this area in Colorado that's kind of like a it's kind of like a national forest area. There's a guy who has some property and he built this like really big castle. And
Hmm.
it's called Bishop's Castle and his name's Jim Bishop. But we would go there as kids and it was like this like really magical space and like super unsafe. Like the stairwell is like climbing up a ladder and then there's like all this weld work on the top that like you like move and the whole thing just like shakes. And so it was like yeah, but then there's like a kind of like central area that's like this like amazing, super
Bro, it was
beautiful.
so quiet when we
I
started.
know. Yeah.
I'm
It's
just
kind of wild.
I'm gonna keep apologizing for that. But
Yeah,
anyway, go
totally. Um
on.
there but the center of it's like an amazing like you like kind of have to climb up 100 feet or so into the like heart of the castle, and it's like a beautiful like kind of central space that people have like banquets and get married inside of,
Oh
and like
wow.
it's like super ornate, but he like built it primarily by himself and with like no permits, and just kind of was like going, I think like it was like one of those things where like he like God told him to do it and he just like kind of like kept on building it and like didn't have like a schematic of like this is what's going to happen next. He just kept like kind of adding to it.
It reminds me a little bit. Have you heard of the Winchester House?
That's the like heiress to the like yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So maybe you know a little bit more about the details, but correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember it, like she had a tremendous guilt for like what her family had like
I believe
reaped on
that's
people
I think
because
that's
she's
like
the heiress to
the
a gun.
narrative
Yeah,
totally,
yeah,
and
and then
like
she just kept building like what is to the house, and there are rooms that like there are doors that open out into like nothingness.
Yeah,
Like
what I
on the
had heard, it
second
was
floor.
it was kind of like almost like booby traps to like throw the ghosts off, because
Oh, she was being
like
haunted.
she was like either being haunted or like it's almost certainly gonna happen. Like my bets are that like my ass is gonna get haunted for sure. So like let me kind of throw these entities off by like making like rooms that like where a stair goes like stair set goes right into a wall and
Yeah,
has no
yeah,
door
yeah,
kind of.
yeah. Booby traps. Yeah, I mean, my head it sometimes gets so full of all these like supernatural kind of things that supernatural narratives that they bleed together. Would you consider that like uh, do people have to be an outsider artist? Do you have to declare what you make art?
That's a good question. I think um it seems like a pretty wide thing, and I think like there are like cases of people who are making artwork and it's just like maybe more of a compulsion
Hmm.
where they're just making stuff. And
I mean, but that is art.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's why I identify with it, I would say.
Yeah.
like I had a funny conversation with someone who uh we were talking about how making can have that, and it's like, man, I think I would stop if I could. Like
Yeah.
it probably logistically makes more sense, but
No, the whole scene is full of crazy people like us that just don't know why they can't stop doing it. Like it's almost like it's in defiance of capitalism that we do it. Like I mean, we would be happy to sell stuff, but it's like it's the least pragmatic way to get into making something because you're basically just like eh.
yeah, totally. And like for certain projects too, it's like the amount of hours that you sink into it, like you can't really, there's like no
Recoup,
recouping
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
um,
I have 3 paintings right now that I was learning how to paint with, how to tape off and use like gel mediums and whatnot to make everything work. And it took me so long. I was like, I'm never gonna be able to sell these. And then now I finally mastered the skills, and all the new ones are taking like so much less time. But
totally.
yeah, that sense of like it's almost impossible to separate that. Like it always kind of lingers on the back of your mind, even if you're just making conceptual stuff that you don't ever plan on selling. You're like, oh, the hours.
Totally. All those research hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, research. And I love that like we can use that word again because there was a period where it was like only certain people of certain stature can be considered to
Do
research. Do
research.
research.
Yeah,
You're not doing research googling. Like, yeah, what the fuck you think that research is? like
like,
academics
do you
don't
use a
use Google.
different search engine?
You got to use DuckDuckGo, which is also a fucking scam.
I didn't realize that. That's
Well, they
funny.
sold out. They flaked on something. I forget what exactly it was, but it was the whole community of people that were into DuckDuckGo were like, this is not good.
Oh man.
I think it was like, I forget what it was. Anyway, but yeah, and then okay, so then
So I was gonna, yeah, maybe mention some other
yeah, yeah.
inspirations. Was like there's a guy, Howard Finster, who is also like outsider artist, and like I feel like a common theme that I hear is like there's like religious undertones or like exploration of like common things that we all go through, but like maybe in a way that is a little more like it's like central to the work. So there are certain outside artists that like religiosity is like a huge part of like their thing. And Howard Finster, I think his main, or like what most people have seen, is he did like a Talking Heads cover album. And
Which one?
so
What album?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like a spaceship,
Okay.
like a very kind of folk art looking spaceship. And he's maybe more of like folk art and outsider art kind of have like an overlap as well, where
What's folk art? How would you define that?
I think like it's a little bit fuzzy for me, like what would distinguish the two.
This is all outside of my like
Yeah,
both of
totally.
these are outside of my. So you are the expert here, and I'm very comfortable being the dummy.
I mean, yeah, being an expert is like my least comfortable space, but from what I
Oh,
know
so I've
about being
made
a
you
folk art,
uncomfortable. my plan backfired.
but like I would say, from my knowledge of folk art, it's kind of like similar to outsider art, but it may have like a bit of a like like an Americana kind of like this is something that like exists in the West and is like something that like uh may kind of like speak to like I don't know, like kind of like industriousness of just someone kind of like building something or making something and kind of just like
Artisanal fascination kind of thing.
yeah, but maybe like instead of going like I think with an artisan maybe in like where the folk art kind of comes in a little more heavily is like there's definitely like folk art that's like super craft
Hmm.
oriented and then like I think of like woodworkers
Yeah,
in
yeah.
certain examples of that, but then for there's also like a sect of like people who have been called folk artists that like instead of embracing like the super specifics of like wood joinery and like how things like work together without fasteners, they kind of just take like the more like lowest common denominator of like I bought all this stuff from the dollar store and like I can make this type of thing from it and I'm gonna
Hmm.
like kind of like paint everything in my house. And so kind of like a more of a like everything around me is art kind of like painting like their whole house and like gluing things to it and like that kind of becoming
Oh, okay.
like
Or like
a
cars
whole
that have
project.
bottle caps on it. Okay, now
Absolutely.
I'm
Totally.
getting the full card of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So like something that, yeah, might not ever see a museum, but like
Yeah.
if you walk across it, you're like, that's fucking cool. Like someone spent like I don't know, like a couple years like collecting
Drinking all
bottle
that
caps,
beer.
totally, yeah, like gluing them individually in like a cool pattern on their car or whatever they ended up doing.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I mean, I'm into that stuff. It's I don't know how I would feel if someone called my work outsider though.
Yeah, I
It's
think
such a weird term.
that's definitely
Do you think
fair.
people like is it something that people claim?
From my understanding, I feel like it's more like I don't
Imposed?
know anyone who like claims it
Yeah.
as like who's like a practicing artist. I feel like it's something who that like history looks back on or like a someone who's writing like a bio piece on someone might look at their work
Mm.
and say like this person is an outsider art. And maybe that, maybe there's something that yeah, is like not super conducive to like it does kind of like draw this binary of like insider outsider like
Well,
kind
yeah,
of
it's
like
I
it
mean,
feels a little othering, but
yeah, I or like it almost seems a little bit condescending, a little bit
yeah.
because I mean, in terms of the things that we've listed so far, self-taught, like there's a lot of artists that are self-taught that like aren't outsider artists. So it's a weird it just seems like a strange thing. I mean, I'm into it. I don't know. It would be interesting for me to hear because Daniel Johnstone is not like that. Like his music is not that unmusical or that, So it's weird to me that he is called that. And but maybe that has more to do with like the mental health stuff that he's been known for.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is like there's tons of musicians who made like there's so many musicians who are really important in our like cultural understanding of what like pop music and modern music is today that like love Daniel Johnston.
Yeah,
There was like
yeah.
a influence on like Kurt Cobain and stuff and like uh so I don't know like what's up with the
Damn, he's
like
been around
distinguish.
since for long enough for Kurt Cobain to be. I mean, I know it makes sense because he passed away recently, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So,
Um
but I never felt like he was that old. He
yeah,
must have been grinding at it for so long.
I think so. And I mean, I think he like also was just making music since he was like a teenager.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of like fell into it and like, in the same way that like was just kind of possessed to do it. Um
And I remember the one of my favorite tracks of his is that Speeding Motorcycle, which is like,
mm.
one of the most popular ones. I'm not like I'm not hitting the deep cuts. But the one we did with Yola Tengo on the radio where they're like where he's like, "Hey, Daniel, say hi to the band." And he's like, "Hi, band." And there's like an innocence to it. Like he's not like there's a lack of like grandiosity to the way that he did that. Like, he's just singing along with his group, with Yola Tango. He's not like he's not nervous or anything. He's just like, yeah, casual.
Totally. I'm just doing my
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then the Wesley Willis stuff was great too. But then I also kind of felt like Howard Stern was making fun of him a little bit.
Yeah, I
Like
get that
Howard Stern
impression
is
with
so
like
fucking mean. If you look back, the
yeah.
whack pack, bro.
I don't know. I didn't see that much of his stuff, but yeah, there's definitely like aspects where I think that happens to unfortunately like yeah, there's like people with disabilities who get taken
Taken
advantage
advantage of.
of and
Yeah,
yeah, it's really uh like the dark side of kind of when like it's cool to see people get their shine and their talent like be exposed, but then
yeah.
like there's also just a
It,
yeah,
it was
thin
like
line where it's
they were
hard to
laughing
tell
at him a little
where
bit.
yeah, I don't remember like seeing him on the Howard Stern show that much, but I actually got to see Daniel Johnston in Denver
Mm.
for I don't it wasn't his last tour or anything, but it was like it was probably in like 2008 or 9 before I moved out here and it was like a complicated like it was complicated seeing the show for me cuz like there was people in the audience who like didn't know who he was
Uh,
and like were kind of like laughing at him and it was like
uh,
yeah, it was just really sad cuz yeah, he just seemed like yeah, like he kind of had to do this show and like was kind of uncomfortable by these people just like
yeah,
kind of wrecking the like the energy of
of the vibe.
making
Yeah,
a like a fun safe place to play a show. Yeah.
yeah. That's crazy. It must be weird to. I don't know. Like, I mean, I really don't know enough about him. Anyway, let's. So, any other people that you want to point out in the visual art? Because like, I don't want to talk about just the ones that I
No, yeah. I
know.
mean, I thought it was just kind of an interesting thing to explore as kind of like
Yeah.
what kind of maybe got me interested in making art and kind of like you were saying earlier, like there's something that's always felt a little like off to me that like people are deemed one thing or another and like it just kind of always attracted me as like, oh, this person is like kind of like painted as like they are outside of the thing, but I like their shit like way more than other stuff that I've
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
like classical museums. Like it always just felt like a little bit more like, okay, like that's fine if people want to call that outsider and this insider, but like I'm just kind
You've
of
drawn into that. Yeah.
interested in like that scene and that kind of like yeah, rawness.
I wonder if it separates itself somehow from like the broader art dialogue too, right? Where if it doesn't fit, like if it doesn't fit into what's happening in the contemporary sense, but it's not necessarily derivative of something else, maybe people can't really put a finger on what it is,
I
So it's
there's
not like,
probably some truth to that. Yeah.
yeah,
Because I think like probably one of the more famous examples is like Henry Darger.
okay.
Have you heard of him?
No, I mean, I literally am out of my element
Yeah, yeah.
here,
He so
which is where I like to be.
totally, and he was like kind of like he kind of has this mythology, and who knows how like true it or not it is, but like he kind of just worked as a janitor and then passed away, and then like this whole huge body of work was like discovered in his apartment, and
Oh,
he
wow.
has
That's a
like a
bummer.
kind of like a crazy mythology and like a whole world that he's built, and like there could be some truth to like kind of what you're saying about like just because he operated almost like completely insulated and was kind of just
Yeah.
like not very concerned about having a dialogue with artist community or
Yeah.
what the contemporary scene, so maybe that just kind of
Yeah.
puts it's easier to categorize that way.
Do you think that these people identify as artists? Like the like the guy from Watts Tower, I forget it. You told me his name.
Simon Rodia.
Yeah. Do you think that they identify like I mean, I would imagine that no one identifies as an outsider artist, right? Because who the fuck wants to be labeled that unless you get like something from it, which is also reasonable too. But I just feel like it's interesting to think of like maybe these people like do they think that they're making art? Like is the intention, or do they think that they're making something else, or they're just compelled to make and they don't know, they don't, you know what, like, you know what I mean? Like
It's
it's
such a good question. Yeah.
because I really think, like, especially doing the show, since I've been doing it for like 5 years now, I have my ideas of what makes an artist, and I don't think that they're necessarily would be like something that academically would be necessarily, like, I would say if you are somebody that has a day job and you make art and you're happy, like, you're an artist. I don't care, you know.
Totally.
But it looks like, but it sounds like there's like always the possibility, like it's fraught. Like you could maybe, like, well, this person's intention wasn't behind it. They
Like
didn't.
they didn't have a thesis about it.
Yeah, or they
Yeah.
didn't get the broader their broader context in which their work fits in. I'm like, I don't fucking get that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's to a certain degree, like that's not the artist's job, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, to
exactly.
contextualize everything.
Yeah. So what are you drawn to? You have a very specific aesthetic currently. I don't know if this is how you've always painted, but like
Yeah, it's been definitely a progression to get here for sure.
but it's like a lot of textury stuff, and then sometimes we got flat stuff. What are you
Yeah,
painting with?
all acrylic.
All acrylic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the more textured stuff, I've been using like a lot of mediums mixed in
Okay.
and
So like thickening mediums and stuff.
like
Yeah.
thickening gel mediums or matte mediums,
And they
and
dry faster.
they dry slower just
They
because
dry
they're
slower.
so thick.
So what do you
But
do? Like you just hit them with heat, or?
sometimes, or what I've done for a lot of these is I like pipe them with like icing bags,
Oh,
and
that makes
then
sense. I
I'll
totally
do
see
it
that.
onto like a sheet of glass, and then the glass can just like dry. Like I have a big drying rack out here, and so it just kind of like hangs out if it's nice and sunny out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so
That
that'll
makes
just kind
sense.
of like, what's great about living in Southern California is like there's so many sunny days where I don't really
Yeah.
have to worry about drying. But there has been times where like if I'm on kind of a bit of a rush, I will do like the hair dryer, just kind of like baking it move. But
Mhm.
that's pretty rare.
So, but I'm seeing a lot of. I can see the interest. I mean, not that I'm not calling your stuff outsider art, but I can see, like, it's I can see the, like, it makes sense that you would be into that based on some of the choices that you make. What is your conceptual interest, conceit, or whatever?
Mm, I mean, yeah, for me, it's kind of like
Are you
that
working with motifs or specific motifs?
a little bit, but for that stuff, I don't have like a super drawn out, like this is kind of what I'm making work about. I think for me, what often ends up happening is like I, I'm kind of exploring my subconscious. And so
Mm,
I'm always kind of doodling. I have like a kind of sketchbook that I'll bring with me places, and kind of how I initially started drawing was just being bored in high school and
yeah,
doodling
yeah.
in the margins. So that was kind of like, uh,
Back when I tried to draw like a graffiti artist.
yeah,
Dude, you should see my handwriting from
I
high school.
love that. Yeah,
It's all like and
giant
yeah.
letters.
No, it's all like, it's all, graffiti ripped off letters. I didn't even really write graffiti, but like I'm dyslexic, so what I at one point I just started to think of like, well, just draw the letters instead of like thinking of the letters, which slowed me the fuck down. And then now my chicken scratch is horrendous because it's like it's got like remnants of those things, but I just do it fast. So
That's so
I
funny.
was doing the type A instead of the A that like,
Right.
the one that has the little hat over,
Uh-huh.
the kind of Papa Smurf
Totally.
hat. Yeah, that those were the but yeah, I totally relate to that. So then, like, what kind of stuff were you drawing back then?
Oh man, I don't even remember like what was kind of in my high school sketchbooks. I think sometimes it was just like letters, or like kind of taking like the cap, like whatever was we were writing in class, and kind of like going for it. But a lot of times I think I was just filling the margins, and like
Mhm.
kind of letting, like just drawing shapes by just kind of like letting the pen or pencil just go as I was like
Mhm.
zoning out, listening to the teacher more or less, just kind of
Yeah.
as a way to like uh not fall asleep essentially. Yeah.
So you wouldn't call flowers a motif?
I mean, I think nature is definitely a motif in what I'm working through, and that's probably like nature, and like I think there's parts of my subconscious that I'm exploring that have to do with like sexuality and like, yeah, that type of like
Well,
part of myself.
let's get into the juicy stuff. What like so those flowers, are they like George O'Keeffe flowers? I'm kidding.
That's up for you to decide. You
No,
tell me, are those Georgia O'Keeffe flowers?
yeah, well, I mean, they don't look vaginal. They look innocent and quirky. They actually, this guy looks like this flower looks like an outsider artist.
I could see that.
Like
Maybe that's what I'm into.
just out and vulnerable, like exposed and like maybe not as refined as people would want their artists to be.
Totally.
So that, but then, so okay, so then like what? Actually, yeah, I do want to know about the sexuality. Like, I mean, because I could definitely see it being in here. There's also some chaos, right? In some of this work, some of it is a
Yeah.
little bit more pared down. But I definitely like. I mean, right behind us, we've got a couple that are.
Yeah, I'm definitely like, I made some work kind of as I was stuck like a handful of years ago that was like pretty simple, just to kind of like get that out of my system. But I would say these days I'm more of a like maximalist, like
Yeah,
just tuck everything with information as much as possible.
I mean, there's negative space, but there's not like solid blocks of negative space unless we're dealing with like these smaller ones.
Totally.
But so then you still haven't answered the sexuality question.
I mean, it's a little bit of an open-ended, like I don't really like necessarily want to like be too pragmatic about like this is that or this is this, but I think for me,
well,
coming to my
thematically,
artistry and like being an artist and like making work is like a very real way to process feelings and to explore like softness.
mhm.
And as someone who's like socialized as a male in like a masculine world, it's been like a very like safe harbor to just be like just a human,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
experiencing life, and being a little bit more gentle, which is, yeah, kind
Well,
of the
I mean,
gentle
that is your
Trent
brand.
aspect of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you definitely. From your Instagram, I was like, oh, this guy is gentle Trent. But like, okay, so then, I mean, yeah, I, I would say that it is still, even despite, like, I wouldn't. It would be a toss up if a woman or man made this work. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I've been told that my work is very masculine,
Mm.
and so, like in fact, I was in a class one time and they were talking about that, and they were like, whose work in this room is the most masculine? And I had these big thick lines in my drawings, and everybody just looked at me. Which is funny to me because now there's this whole culture about like masculinity, like the whole red pill community, and I'm like, I've never had a problem with my masculinity. I've never been like, I need to explore this.
Mm.
Like it just is. So but so then are you where are you, like, do you identify as a man or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I definitely at this stage of my life identify as a cis man.
okay.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah.
yeah.
So no one wants to hear about that. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I still think it's an interesting. I don't think that it is about exploring masculinity, just to be clear. But I just do think it's interesting that now there is a push for that, right?
Mm.
Like in pop culture and in culture wars, it's crazy. I have a friend artist that like talks a lot about
Hmm.
it, and he's a great guy. But like, I'm like, oh man, I don't, like this doesn't resonate with me. I've
Hmm.
never been like, yeah, my masculinity is like inherent in my identity. Have you ever felt like that?
Like it's like a core part of who I am.
Or that's like something you even have to really explore. I just take it for granted.
Hmm. Uh, I don't know.
It might
Yeah,
be. I think it's a generational thing too.
I could see that.
I'm
Yeah,
not bashing the people that are obsessed with it. I think that like I came from a culture where it was like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all of that. So I was never like, but I think that now there is sort of like it is a little bit taboo to be a boy in some ways, which is where I come from, which that
yeah.
comes from.
Hmm.
Not that I feel that way, but I feel like maybe people feel that way.
Hmm.
Like people that are talking about that stuff.
Gotcha.
which I think is so. I'm not like I don't think they're like red pillars in the Andrew Tate way, but but there are people that are like, yeah, what does it mean to be a man? Which I think is valid, but I'm not like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is more of a newer thing that's coming up. That people have. Did you say now you identify as a cis man? Did you ever fluctuate with that or
No, no,
no?
yeah. But I mean, I guess it's leaving space for like, I don't know. We all have a long life, and yeah, who
Oh, okay.
knows?
So in the future, you might.
Yeah,
You're
could be.
open to the possibility. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, my sibling has always identified as lesbian, and now they just recently came out as a non-binary, and I was like, yeah, that shit really makes sense.
Mm.
It's like it wasn't a hard one for me to be like, you know what? Nah, you're a lesbian.
Yeah, I think that makes, I mean, especially if you know the person really well, like one of my friends came out as non-binary, like I guess like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and it was just like
Yeah.
that. It was like, of course, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
totally,
it didn't exist when I was a kid,
totally.
So, I mean, when I was a kid, everybody was just afraid of being the F word, like because everybody was using that word and calling each other
Hmm.
that, So yeah, that is a crazy thing. It's an interesting, like I do find, you know, I find it interesting how that stuff shows up in artwork.
Mm.
Like for example, like I don't think I can make feminine work. Like I just it's not something that is really something, but you play a little bit with like the floral stuff and stuff. So I get what you're saying where it's like you leave it open for that.
Yeah, and I think like for me an interesting thing is that like outside of like the biological or like how we are culturally describing gender, there's kind of like that idea of Jung's psychology of like we both innately have anima and animus, which are like female and male kind of like
Yeah.
within us. Like we're all kind of like a cocktail of everything. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think for me that has always just kind of felt like pretty clear and like
Mhm.
something that like, you know, as an adult I enjoy, but like coming from a small town was like something that was like, yeah,
Yeah.
people are throwing around the F word like pretty generously in like a in a
It's a
not cool
hearty
way.
helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, was something that, yeah, was maybe a little bit more
Well,
like
that's what's
sheltered or like not really mixing it up with those crowds as a young person.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and like yeah, I mean, you know what? It has always been weird to be a guy. I just think that it was our world when we were younger. And now it's a shared world. So now I kind of I'm trying to think about like why people are that interested in this stuff, But like in it there's a whole industry about it, which is crazy to me, of like just being men.
Yeah, at least I mean, I feel like for the States, yeah, Bud Light is a very American brand.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm forgetting what it was. There was an alcohol company, and I can't remember which one it was, but they released like a very beautiful like trans friendly ad overseas,
Mhm.
and yeah, that was like it was like this like the narrative was like this like kind of like grandpa wanting to like make his like trans grandchild feel comfortable, so it's like practicing putting on makeup, and it was like very like
Mhm.
heartfelt and sweet, and it seemed like
And it
there was
got
no issues.
did it get
Like
a backlash or no?
no, I think people have
Oh,
received it very
yeah,
warmly,
yeah.
which
No,
is I think
yeah,
just
yeah.
maybe more speaks to like volatility in the States versus
Yeah.
people being a little more.
I'm trying to think about homophobia outside of the States. I mean, not that this is our topic that we should be talking about as two straight cis men. We should maybe veer from it. But yeah, I mean, I w- I wonder what, like, because trans is like a really old thing. Like trans people have existed like since forever. And one of the things that's interesting is in the Philippines, like they kind of diffuse. and like I've heard this from a podcast, so that the validity of this is up to you. But apparently, like in the karaoke bars, they'll like hire trans bouncers because when they confront the men that are maybe getting a little wild, it's less emasculating because you know, like it's not like two dudes bumping chests. It's a woman and a man, like a woman calming a man down.
Interesting.
So it's it really is an interesting thing how it's become a thing in this country, you know.
Totally. Just
But
like yeah,
yeah, but
very
we could
hot button.
change the subject.
But you grew up outside of the States, right?
Yeah, that's why I was trying to figure out like how. I mean, there's bad words for gay people over there that I'm not gonna. There's several.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna repeat them, but yeah, and we got called that all the time. I don't know how progressive with homosexuality and all of that stuff Italy is, but I just also haven't been there in forever, you know, because this is like a new thing that's kind of globally becoming a conversation piece, right? Which is fine because like we've we've made progress on some of the gay stuff, on some of the gay rights, and like we keep going. we don't sit on our laurels.
Definitely.
But yeah, well, cool, man. So then, Colorado nature. You are a little
Yeah,
granola.
a little bit. Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
Gentle Trent.
yeah, LA has maybe brought it out more for me too, but
Really?
I don't know, in certain ways, like I guess depends on how we're using granola, but like I feel like granola and hippie are kind
Yeah,
of
yeah. So
like
you
similar.
identify as a hippie?
Not really, but
Okay.
like I think there are certain like parts of like Southern California that lend itself to that. Like this space is a co-op.
Oh, really?
So like yeah, there's elements of like
Communal living?
yeah, that like I don't know,
Do you have
definitely have
communist
overlap.
tendencies?
Uh yeah, certainly, for sure.
Okay.
But
Anarchist?
to a degree,
Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay.
like I'm yeah, definitely like not the most politically educated
Yeah,
in
but you're
those
also not
terms.
offended by the shit that I post, so,
Yeah.
so that's a good indication.
But yeah, I think like in general, like there are like things like collective living that kind of like would fall under like the hippie umbrella to your
Uh-huh.
average person that like I wouldn't really identify as a hippie, but maybe an outsider would say like, "Oh, you live in a co-op.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a hippie thing."
What do you mean by co-op? So you guys are, is there like farmland here that you guys?
No, it's just like shared housing and that like everything is kind of like
So there's a shared
discussed.
bathroom.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
How many people?
this space when I was living here was 11.
Oh, okay. So it is like okay, and then shared bathroom and but like there's no like it's a living arrangement. It's not also a compound where you have like guns
No,
or
there's not like a political manifesto or
no, and
anything. It's
then
like more of
you're
a
not the leader.
no, there is no leader.
You have the
Yeah,
charisma for
yeah.
it.
That's very kind.
I'm kind of trying to sign up.
No, it's like what's yeah, the idea behind it is kind of like non-hierarchical, so
Okay.
everything has to be made, like all the decisions have to be made via consensus,
And
which
what kind of decisions are we talking about?
like
Who's gonna cook tonight, or
a lot of that stuff is kind of streamlined. So
okay?
there was a cooking schedule, but like it's kind of like just a few nights a week. And then you kind of just like rotate through that. But like if you wanna, let's say like for instance, like building this space,
Hmm.
I kind of had to like run that through everyone and
Wait,
like
you built this shack
I did, yeah.
like from the ground up, or you
Hmm.
filled in the inside?
No, from the ground up. Like this wasn't here
Oh
like
wow, dude!
5 years ago.
Look at you fucking low keying it. Jesus Christ!
um,
Wow, that's really impressive.
yeah, so
It looks like it's
like
been here a while.
bigger projects like you kind of have to like get everyone to sign off and bring it up as a discussion or
Do you have
even
to
something.
share this space now, or no?
No,
So you have your own private studio in a
yeah.
collective. Nicely done, sir.
Thank you.
I think you are the leader of the cult. I think we're gonna have the DEA kind of come in here.
Just like kick down the already open doors.
Do you know what I'm referencing? Waco.
No. Oh God.
You look like the kind of guy that would burn his whole following. sorry, that was harsh. No, I'm kidding. You would never. That's really impressive, man. So then, what do you also? So aside from painting, you have some serious carpentry skills. Like,
I mean, not really. So this is the only carpentry I'd done outside of like there's a space behind this where we had put up some walls, which was like very simple studs, but the only stuff I had built before this was like panels to paint on.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And yeah, shout outs. I mean,
You
know YouTube. I just watched a shitload of YouTube videos and just figured
Really?
it out. Yeah.
Damn, yo, that's fucking crazy. I'm really impressed. I did not see that coming.
Thanks. I didn't mean to like bury the lead or anything.
No,
but,
no.
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty good. Then okay, and then lastly, you were kind of talking about what you're doing next. It doesn't sound like you're abandoning your art practice.
No, yeah. So I was kind of telling you before we started rolling that I am in school again, and I'm like pivoting to get a nursing degree.
Mhm.
But it was kind of like a decision I was weighing out for a while, and I definitely appreciate kind of some of the stuff you go through on the podcast, where it's like, you know, working class and like what you mentioned earlier, where it's just like, yeah, like you can. It's very most artists work like a job and then make their work, and I think it's very.
And we're not outsiders, motherfucker.
And it's like a very grounding thing to kind of like think about. And for me, I've just always worked jobs, and so it was just kind of like a decision where I was like, well, I'm probably gonna end up working in some real field anyways, so I might as well kind of like take some time and get into a field that has like a little more job security, because I was kind of bouncing around the past couple of years where
don't get a job coding anymore.
Okay, good to know.
Because they're all getting laid off.
Oh,
dude, it's crazy. Yeah, no,
but
I think that. Sorry, did you have something you want?
Oh no, it just it's kind of aligns with stuff I'm interested in, and like
you seem like a caring person. Like you like to give people care.
Totally, I'm like very social, and like working with something that's like, although like, you know, healthcare system is tough, but like they're giving people care is something that I'm like interested in doing, and that's like kind of, I've worked jobs before, like when I taught English abroad, it was like kind of the definition of like the perfect job for like a 23-year-old, where like it doesn't really matter whether you're there or not.
And someone else could be.
Someone else could easily be, or like I was kind of like administering like a lot of tests and stuff, and so that kind of like, I was like not 22 when I was doing that. I was like 29. So my existential crisis just like started like firing through the roof. So I'm someone who like kind of needs to like, if I'm working and spending a lot of time doing something, it kind of needs to align with me in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's actually kind of brilliant, because you guys have like nurses have like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or something like that, right? Or they're 2 days on.
Depends. So my family members that like are in the field, it's like 3 on, 4 off.
3 days on.
But it doesn't have to be back to back.
But that I mean, that's like, I mean, I know the shifts are tough, like, because those 3 ons are not like, and they're 8-hour
like
shifts.
They're like 12 hours.
They're like 12 hours. You know, so it's pretty draining. But it sounds like you have a decent amount of time to paint still, or you will.
That'll be the goal.
Once you get through nursing school,
exactly.
It might slow down a little bit.
Right now, it's a little bit of a snail's pace, but just keeping things flowing.
You're in school now?
I'm in school now.
But
I'm taking some science classes. Yeah, I mean, I have some like work made and ready to go, so that's nice, and that's like something that was kind of an unexpected thing in this season, where I was like, I've just been kind of like the last 6 months just making works on paper and kind of trying to keep staying creative, but science classes they're hard. The last science class I was in high school, so
school is like the
learning curve for sure.
The highest stakes fake thing that ever happens in your life.
Yeah, what's funny too is like being an adult student, like you just, at least for me, I have way less patience for the like fakeness of it. And so it's just
Yeah.
like, this makes no sense that I just spent 8 hours studying this thing that I didn't have to necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think that that's actually like in terms of documenting different ways that people make a living and still make art. I think that that is actually a pretty good one. You know, you're not going to be poor. You're going to be out of this communal living situation. You're going to leave the
I'm going to
working
start a whole
class.
different commune.
Yeah, no, you're going to leave the working class, and then you're going to have class solidarity with all the rich people. And you're going to be
That's
like,
going to be really hard to achieve for me.
No, yeah, there was a moment I recently, as I was looking for work, I became, I didn't fall victim to the scam, but I believed it just until the moment, because I was like, I also don't want to tell them to fuck off. Just until the moment they started to ask me for things that I'm like, okay, this is a scam, you know. But yeah, like there was a moment where I thought I was going to be making like upper middle class money, and I was like, fuck you guys.
Drop that class solidarity like it's hot.
Yeah, it's like, damn, oh, that's how this works. That's how capitalism works.
That's funny.
Well, cool, man. Anything that you want to say that we haven't gotten to yet, or
No, yeah, that feels
cool.
like a pretty good. Yeah,
cool. Anything that we can promote for you? It's mostly just because of the like. I don't know how much longer I can make people listen to.
Definitely.
But we're homies. We'll hang out.
Yeah.
I'll like. You should hit up the our next opening is probably not this weekend, not the next weekend, but the weekend after. Anyway, keep an eye out. I'll definitely be there. You should come out. You are
Certainly
welcome to hang out.
Yeah,
and I'll introduce you to whoever is there. Because
definitely.
we don't always make it out, which is like fine. That's why there's so many of us. But yeah, anybody that you haven't met, I think you've met Amanda and Sarah probably, right? Because they're the curators for the open call. And yeah, there's like 6 of us other than that, I think, that are living in Miami. Everybody else is either in New York or somewhere else, Seattle. Someone's in Oakland, I think. I don't know where Danny Trejo is, but not the actor.
Okay.
I always forget, like I say his name and then I'm like, oh, people don't know who I'm talking about. They're picturing Machete. But yeah, man. Well, you're at Gentle Trent on Instagram.
Totally, at Gentle Trent on Instagram.
Website?
Yeah, gentletrent.com.
Gentle Trent. That is a good branding. I would not abandon that. Especially after having met you. Like you used to have not blonde hair, right?
Yeah, I had brown hair.
Yeah. And then back then, like now there's a little bit more of an edge to you with the blonde hair. You got a Kurt Cobain vibe.
Great. Yeah,
but back then but with the brown hair, you looked really gentle.
That's hilarious.
I hope that's not offensive.
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing the show, man. It's
Absolutely.
been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on getting into the show.
Yeah.
Even though I was
pleasure.
not part of the selection process, I was still happy that you made it in because I've been
Appreciate
aware of
that.
your stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related. Thank you so much for watching.
Awesome.
Cool, man.
Appreciate that.